often tell guys, during this period, particularly the first couple of weeks, which there can be a bit of a honeymoon, I go, look, use it. Go for a walk, do more physical activity. If you're feeling more activated and you can't sleep, go for a walk, do some push-ups, get some exercise, get into the physical body. And I'm like, you didn't have a temper. Like, you weren't controlling a temper, you were placid. Now you have a temper, now you need to learn to regulate it. I say, welcome to turbocharged puberty part 2.
Let's say you've got a new patient, whatever, who's about to start their TRT.
Sure.
Obviously, that initial phase, you're probably taking a system that has been devoid or very low on testosterone. So you've got a lot of receptors that are kind of like screaming out for this stuff.
Yeah.
So those 4 to maybe say first 12 weeks are probably a bit of a whirlwind.
Oh, yeah.
Right, when you actually finally give the thing all these. So, testosterone is going to have acute effects and genetic effects, which I think would be good for you to talk about the difference and how long you should be waiting for the latter. How do you go about setting their expectations during that initial phase where all these acute effects are going to hit? There's going to be a lot of up and down regulation. There's probably going to be water weight and conversion issues perhaps at first. How do you go about kind of explaining that and setting the roadmap out for them?
I say, welcome to turbocharged puberty part 2. Because that's what it is. I mean, there's again, we're kind of looking at 2 different populations. We've got the guys who are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, and we're going, hey, we're going to take your endocrine environment back to replicate more of what it was when you were in your 20s. It's like returning home. Like, it's just like, oh, this is how I used to feel. Great. If you take a guy who's 30, who's never had an optimal androgenic surge in his body before, this is new territory. This is essentially puberty, but now you're an adult with responsibilities who can drive and so on and so forth. And it's happening hard and it's happening fast. It's one of the reasons I started a support group for my clients, because this first, I would say all the way to 6 months, but yeah, particularly the first maybe 2 to 3 months, it is a rocky road. There is a lot changing. The first thing I try to do with them is go frame the sensations that you're experiencing as positive. Where you were at before wasn't working, and now you're feeling change take place. So just try to frame everything that you feel as a positive. I mean, unless of course you get fucking gyno, but if you're like, I can't sleep, like I'm feeling overstimulated, like, guys will sometimes say, and they'll go, I can't control my temper anymore. And I'm like, you didn't have a temper. Like, you weren't controlling a temper, you were placid. Now you have a temper, now you need to learn to regulate it, which is why I think martial arts is important, because you learn that you don't know shit about fighting. That's a very important thing to learn when you first get a temper. So that first period is very tricky. Typically what will happen, because testosterone, it's not a stimulant, but it does activate the central nervous system. So a lot of the time guys will feel overstimulated. And if you've got an anxious mind, that overstimulation can be perceived and felt as anxiety. This can be challenging. And I often tell guys, during this period, particularly the first couple of weeks, which there can be a bit of a honeymoon, I go, look, use it. Go for a walk, do more physical activity. If you're feeling more activated and you can't sleep, go for a walk, do some push-ups, get some exercise, get into the physical body. The best way to get out of your mind is into the physical body. And then when we're looking at it from a protocol standpoint, when I've got guys who've never had optimal androgens before, I think the more frequent the administration can be, the better. Twice a week for cypionate and anthate works really well for a lot of guys. But if you've never had this surge before, I think sometimes it's better to start a bit more conservatively and increase the dose through titrating over time rather than just shooting straight for the moon. And then also maybe going for 3 injections a week. If guys want to do it daily, great, but a lot of guys don't want to do that. But I think 3 days a week rather than 2 days, starting a bit more conservative and then working up in small increments every 3 to 4 months, that's going to allow the subjective adjustment phase, which again, 6 to 12 months, but particularly the first few months, to be a lot more comfortable. And also less prone to side effects. And then the other thing that these guys have to learn, and this is something that I speak about a lot, is that when you are hypogonadal, you will often maladapt the stress from that with coping mechanisms. So things like, drinking alcohol or eating too much junk food or having a poor diet and lifestyle. If you optimize your testosterone levels to, the upper end of where they should be, you have to come in and start living in a way that you would be making those levels naturally if you could. Otherwise, you've now created a disconnect. You've created a body that would never have optimal testosterone levels, and now you're pumping them in. So this is what causes side effects. So the thing that I try to teach them over this period is you have to now meet the medicine halfway. You have to show up in a way that you would be optimizing your natural levels if you were making them naturally. And that's why the natural testosterone optimization stuff is the same as the treatments for getting rid of side effects on TRT. It's dropping body fat, dropping vices, eating well, moving more, having good cardiovascular fitness. You can't have optimal testosterone levels and get out of breath climbing upstairs, because you would never be having those optimal testosterone levels if you had poor cardiovascular fitness. And that discrepancy between what you would be making and what you're taking will show up as side effects.
If you've just started TRT, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. There's a lot of new territory to cover, and there is a lot of conflicting information. I wrote TRT 101 so that you can have everything that you need to know in an instruction manual in one place that you can refer back to, that you can have all the questions answered before they even come up. TRT 101 is my best practice approach for TRT from start to finish, and it contains everything that you need to avoid all the challenges and pitfalls that I've seen come up in my clients over the last 5 years. You can check it out by the link below.
That's a very good point. So in that scenario there, we've got that, say, 3 to 6 month period where these acute effects are setting in. What should people be expecting to see in terms of positives there versus the longer, more genetic-based effects that are going to take place 6, 12, 18, 24 months, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the clinical outcomes that we're trying to achieve with TRT, we're looking at the effects from prolonged exposure to androgens over time. This is what we're looking to improve. Things like basically restoring you and turning you into the man that you should have been all along. And that's a process that takes time. Puberty took years. TRT, the effects of TRT takes years. However, the acute subjective benefits that you can receive at the start are a welcome change when you've had low testosterone for a while. And I'm sure you can attest to that as I can as well. The benefits that we're looking, so I like to kind of put things out in, if we're looking at a graph, to go, okay, let's say that we break the benefits down into feeling better mentally, feeling better, I don't want to use the word spiritually, but feeling more like masculine, feeling that kind of androgenic, well-being sense, improved immune system, improved, muscle hypertrophy, reduced body fat, as long as you're training and eating properly, of course. And then libido and sexual function. That's the big one that a lot of guys talk about. The problem is, well, not the problem, the reality and the limitation of TRT is that libido is impacted by everything else in your psychology, physiology. It's the downstream effect of everything. Libido is a signal for you to reproduce. So if you're in a survival state, your body's not going to signal you to reproduce. So what I like to say to guys, and this turns out to be very true, is that over the 6 months, all of these graphs will start to move up at different points. Typically, people start to feel energized first. They feel more activated. Maybe they feel a bit more confident. Maybe they go, oh, now that diet and training program, I'm actually getting the results I should have been getting the whole time, which I wasn't. The last one that moves is libido. So sometimes you can get like a surge of libido for the first couple of weeks because you get this dopaminergic response from your body being like, holy crap, there's a whole bunch of testosterone here that I've never had before. But the sexual benefits of testosterone, they start to move for some guys after 3 to 6 months, and then can really take multiple years to truly take effect. And one of the big mistakes guys make is they get, let's say 6 months in, and they go, I had a massive libido surge at the start, and now I'm kind of closer to where I was before. And I'll turn around and go, do you feel 20% better than you felt before you started? Oh yeah, I feel at least 20%. Cool, that's a win. That's not a bad thing. Some guys think that once you reach the optimal serum testosterone level, that you will feel the optimal benefits of TRT. This is not stupid. This makes sense because with any other drug or medication you take, when it reaches peak serum levels, that's when you feel it the most. Your pre-workout, you feel the most when it peaks in your system. Testosterone, what you're hoping to achieve and feel is the prolonged exposure to that level for months and years. So that can be the thing that guys can sometimes be a little bit disappointed with, but also just need a reality check, which is that the libido is the last thing that's going to come to fruition. But in the interim, all the other benefits should just be gradually going up over time.
Sure. So considering that, when do you start looking at potentially adjusting a dosage? Because if we have that initial phase where thing just is like wildfire and, they're reacting like crazy, and then we get this patience that's required then for this equilibrium and for everything to creep up, what would really be a sensible time period then for you to actually assess the effect that specific dose is having?
Yeah, cool. This is a great question. So people have different ways of doing this. The late Dr. John Crisler used to say there's an art and a science to TRT. Very, very, very true. I say there's multiple ways to skin a cat because I think that saying's funnier, but different ways to do things. The way that I recommend that we do it, so again, I'm going to talk about reference ranges because the units that people will be looking at are very different, and I always get them wrong when I'm in a podcast. So the optimal testosterone level for TRT is somewhere between the top quartile of the range and double the top of the range. With the range where it is now, maybe it's even triple the top of the range. It's getting that low. So that's a big range, but we're also looking at a big patient population. You've got everyone from 18-year-olds to 80-year-olds with every level of health. So there should be a big range. I think, and again, this is coming from years of coaching experience, having a couple of clinics, doing a lot of this, I think the best course of action, and people may disagree, but that's cool, is that we should shoot, assuming the guy is in relatively good health, shoot for about the top of the range to start with. Because that is generally going to be 3 to 4xing their testosterone levels. That's a lot. That may not be the end destination. And for a lot of younger guys, it absolutely isn't. But the way that I like to do it is to shoot for about the top of the reference range to begin with. I can already feel people freaking out because I'm talking about staying within the reference range, but shooting for the top of the reference range, which for most guys, assuming you respond averagely, is about 120 to about 160 milligrams per week of testosterone, divided into 2 to 3 shots. And then once you get to that point, I like to let it settle there for a good 3 to 4 months and go, okay, we've given it 8 to 12 weeks to build up. Your levels are about in that point. Let's let it settle. And then when they come back after that point, their body's taking time to adjust. We'll see how they're feeling. And if they're going, hey, everything feels fantastic, everything feels awesome, cool. If it ain't broke, don't fix. That's fantastic. Because more is not better past a certain point for each guy. And what will happen is guys will come in and go, oh, I want to up my dose. And then they'll come back and they'll be like, oh, now I have all these side effects. And it's like, well, this is why you don't pick your own dose, bro. So at that point, if they come back, so let's say they've been on, they've been in this kind of top of the range, give or take by a quartile, and they're going, yeah, I feel like there's some room for improvement here. That's when I think titration should begin up. I like to titrate by 5 to 10 milligrams per injection. So that would typically look like, 10 to 30 milligrams per week. I think titrating by any more than that causes kind of like a whiplash effect. So it's not that could take you too high, it's that you get too high too quick. So I like to titrate by, again, averages by about, 15 to 25 milligrams a week every 3 to 4 months until we reach that sweet spot where they feel good. The thing with the TRT dosing is that you can always bring it up and bring it down. Like you don't have to go, oh, once I get there, then I can't come back down. It's like, no, you can come back down. We can adjust this to a point that it feels good. And the most important thing that we're looking at is not so much what is that testosterone number on paper, it's how does the rest of the blood work look, particularly things like the holistic relationship between like lipids, liver panel, red blood cell count, blood pressure, sleep, all of these factors as well, and also seeing how they're feeling day to day. If you take too much testosterone, yeah, you'll feel like a beast in the gym, but you'll also sweat like a motherfucker after you eat. Your sleep will go to shit. There's a whole bunch of side effects that come if you go past that sweet spot. So titrating up in increments of, as I said, 10 to 30 milligrams every 3 to 4 months after they've taken about, 3 to 6 months to settle into the starting dose to begin with, I think is the best way to play it.
Sure. And how much variation do you see? First, in terms of what number ends up being optimal for that person, but also how that person responds to X dosage. So, like, you put all three of us on 200 milligrams per week, and the response you see in terms of testosterone level in response to that. How much variation is there at a population level?
Sure. So I wrote a book about this a couple of years ago called TRT 101, and I'm happy to say that it's aged like wine. It's aged. I stand by everything in that book. So I have found that there is about 8 out of 10 guys will respond about the same, within a striking distance of the same kind of levels. 1 out of 10 guys will shoot through the roof, taking next to nothing. I have guys who are taking like 70 milligrams a week, and their levels are as high as the average guy taking 250. Those guys are lucky. Like, that's awesome. I also have guys who are taking 300 milligrams a week, and they're barely hitting the top of the reference range. So I find that 8 out of 10 about the same. 1 in 10 hyper responder, 1 in 10 hypo responder, meaning low. But 8 out of 10 fall into the same category. And that's why, so in Australia and Europe, we compound testosterone at 250 milligram per mil. I think 150 per week is a good starting dose for most guys. SHBG is a factor. There's other factors that will impact that because it divides into 0.2 mil 3 times a week or 0.3 mil twice a week. It makes it easy to do. And that will typically give someone a total testosterone of about 25 to 35 nanomole per liter. I'm not sure what the conversion is into the numbers that you guys use over here, but that's about the top of the range, give or take.
For me, it was the dopamine effect and the effect on the dopamine receptors. For me, that made the big difference.
If you meditate consistently daily for 8 to 12 weeks, which 90% of people will not do because it's uncomfortably boring, the prefrontal cortex will physically get bigger and the amygdala will physically get smaller. So we're actually able to change the architecture of the brain from this training